crime way up here in New York City, the place that is supposed to be, because of history, because of what had happened before. New York was the city that, in many ways, led the charge in normalcy, safety, cleanliness of the streets. I mean, making everything function better as a city, from bringing down homicides to bringing up sanitation. New York was this place that was a beacon in the 90s for the rest of the country. And guess what? The big lie we were told for a long time, you remember this, Clay, was that the murder numbers were up, and pretty much everywhere across the country. Shootings were up, violent crime was up because of COVID,
yes,
which never made sense. But it was purely a delay tactic. And what we've seen now, just hoping that something else would come up or really that the numbers would start to fall, right? It was just don't allow people to talk about this because the longer they do, the more frustrated they'll become. So act like it's COVID, even though that made absolutely no sense from the very beginning. Clay, they've got a big problem. You might have seen over the weekend there was a new Pew Poll that came out. And it turns out, and I think this is entirely unsurprising, that the top three concerns for African-American voters, crime, housing, the economy. Crime really at the top of the list. Racism at the very, very bottom of the list. It just feels like 1 year and change in, Biden's whole presidency is just a catalog of failure so far.
Yeah, it's an unmitigated disaster on virtually every level for the Biden administration. And in particular, Buck, if you look at those numbers, it reflects what we've been saying on this show for a long time. What did we say on Friday? Joe Biden's approval rating among Hispanic voters is down to 26%. That's lower than it is for white voters. And even for black voters, I believe it was down to 65%, which is an unbelievably low number for historically a Democratic president to find himself in. And it's because white, black, Asian, Hispanic people tend to have the biggest similarities in thoughts. When we're talking about 8.5% inflation, Buck, and I had a situation, I went and filled up my car, and we've talked about how it costs over $100 now for many of us out there to fill up our gas tank. Buck, the person right in front of me, and I don't know who it was because I wasn't, I didn't see who the car was that pulled out, but they had bought 1 gallon for $4.19. And I'm standing there looking at it right before I'm taken out to fill up my own. And I'm thinking, how many people out there are struggling to such a degree economically that they pull up to the gas station and they cannot afford to put more than 1 or 2 gallons of gas into their car at a time? I think there's a lot of people like that. And those people, white, black, Asian, and Hispanic, they're concerned about the economy and they're concerned about crime. And it is the overwhelming focus, I think, of everyone. And Democrats are failing across the board on those two issues primarily.
It does sound increasingly pathetic, Clay. I mean, there's not really a good pitch that the Democrats even can give for what they've done that has gone well. In fact, I think you could draw a straight line between mainstream Democrat ideology, the base of the Democrat Party, decisions that have been taken, and disastrous results on crime, on the border, on inflation, on the economy, on lockdowns. People are. One good indicator I've seen is that the dominoes did not immediately fall right after Philadelphia's mask mandate went into place. So far. I agree, it is so far. But I thought by now you would have seen some cities follow. I was worried that New York was going to follow suit. I think that there's concern about people being able to reason through this enough after enough pointless suffering, which is what all the masking and the lockdowns and everything, it was pointless suffering. It was really theatrical in its only purpose, to show people we're doing something. And then the alternatives are for them to just create a whole separate narrative, a whole separate storyline for what's really going on, in America today. Here is a Democratic pollster, for example, saying, what we have to do, Clay? The Democrats need to pretend that Trump is on the ballot.
Morale is extremely low amongst the Democratic coalition. We are seeing cynicism and frustration with the perceived lack of progress on the progressive agenda. And the truth is, Democrats have made significant progress on issues that are most important to the Democratic base, but they are not telling that story. And so, a part of what we have to do here in the midterm is portray a message of unfinished business. And there's two sides of that. A part of that unfinished business, we have to put Trump back on the ballot, but that does not mean that we get to make every Republican seem like Trump. It means that we have to literally explain that if Republicans win the House and the Senate in 2022, they will reinstall Trump in 2024.
So can I just point out, Clay, that it's incongruous? I mean, he really gives away the game with, oh, yeah, we've made a lot of strides with the progressive agenda, which is just not true. In fact, the only places where they've pushed with the progressive agenda, things like schools, where they've had these big fights over the Don't Say Gay bill, they're actually losing ground now. Those battles are going against them. If they were doing well and delivering for the American people, the Democrat Party wouldn't then turn around and say, let's pretend that Donald Trump is on the ballot.
Well, and it didn't work in 2021 because that's what they tried to do. And that was in short order after Trump had been on the ballot. So now 2 years in, you have to own whatever is going on, good or bad. Joe Biden is responsible for it. You can't blame the boogeyman of Trump. Now, that certainly may well be the strategy in 2024, Buck. And that's actually one of the things that concerns me about Trump running in 2024, which I believe he's going to do, and I think he should win. But Trump has to run a different campaign in 2024 than he did in 2016. 2016, he was the change agent. 2024, what Republicans need to run on is Joe Biden was a disaster, and we're not going to be a disaster. And my one concern about Trump in 2024 is Republicans will have everything set up to win. Will Democrats be able to argue against Trump as opposed to defending Biden? Because what should be on the ballot in 2024 is all of the failures of the Biden administration. What Democrats, you just heard, they're trying to do it in 2022. I don't think it's going to work. It didn't work in 2021. But if Trump is on the ballot, does Trump become the story as opposed to Biden failures? Because if it's Biden failures, Republicans win. If it's Trump, maybe, possibly, Democrats can be rallied enough, even though things are awful in the country, and independents too, who might be able to vote against Trump. That's my concern. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah. And I think that what we're seeing right now is a Democrat Party that is having to try to defend what is largely politically just indefensible. I mean, no one thinks that the worst inflation rate in 40 years is something that you can just wave a hand and pretend isn't there. No one thinks that, as you just pointed out, gas is so expensive that it's really hurting people's budgets, daily, weekly budgets. Folks who don't have spare cash to throw around are saying, what the heck is going on here? And also, at some level, the bill for the lockdowns, which Republicans in the early stage were somewhat complicit in, but quickly said, hold on a second, this wasn't a good idea. Within a few months, certainly, most of them were saying that. And I mean, the full-on lockdowns, the bill for lockdowns is coming due with inflation. Biden made it a lot worse by spending $1.9 trillion. I'm looking at this as almost an exercise in where are they going to come at us? Like, where are they going to actually try to make gains against the Republican Party based on results or based on some narrative? It just feels like right now they're flailing. There's nothing. This stuff isn't working. And I think that between crime, the economy, and the border, Democrats are heading for a really brutal midterm, which should be an awakening, I think, for the whole country. And there'll be so much political momentum that Joe Biden's not going to be able to turn around. You've got to remember, Barack Obama was an almost messianic figure for Democrats. I mean, Barack Obama was, by his own words, going to stop the rise of the seas, right? So even if the first 2 years of Obamaism weren't all that great, there was this ability to just say, but the great Barack Obama will save us, and he is president, right? I mean, there was this notion that all you needed was to give him more time. No one thinks that Joe Biden's going to get better with more time, nor is he messianic in any way, which is
no doubt.
So this is the problem they're facing.
Well, not only, it's not even just Obama. Remember the shellackings that Democrats took in 1994 and in 2010, which I think are going to be similar to what we're going to see in 2022 in November. Those shellackings occurred with really skilled politicians in office. Bill Clinton was able to triangulate his way back to re-election by 1996. To your point, Obama, whether you love or hate him, really skilled politician, being able to work his way back towards re-election in 2012. Does anyone think that Joe Biden is a shadow of Barack Obama or Bill Clinton in terms of communication and the presidency? In other words, does anyone think that when this shellacking happens, Joe Biden can pull the Democratic Party out of this hole? I don't, which is why I think he's actually not going to run after this beatdown.
I don't think, and we all know that politicians at that level are almost universally egomaniacs. I'm going to say it on both sides. You do need somebody with a very beyond healthy ego usually to run for president or run for some of the highest offices. I don't think Joe Biden thinks that he's a shadow of the politician that Barack Obama or Bill Clinton were for the Democrat Party. So this is why, what have they got right now? But I also feel like there must be some kind of political offensive that they're planning. I just haven't seen it yet. I mean, we know they're going to talk about Trump. We know they're going to talk about white supremacy and things like that. A lot of class warfare stuff will come up, too. They'll try to play the old Joe Biden. He's just hanging out with his lunch pail with all the union workers. Sure he is, guys, with his like multi-million-dollar properties that he owns all over the Eastern Seaboard. He's just like everybody else. Because right now, Clay, I mean, you got to wonder. It's almost like the mercy rule might have to be called in after this election. Like, we can't hold another one until the Democrats get their act together.
6 months, just a little bit over 6 months till the red wave.